bist du ihr aller Ehre. Was ist Wundes hier geschehen? Dass ein Magd ein Kind gebar, ihre über aller Engel Schar. Was das nicht ein Wunder gab.
This is The New Right, a podcast for the lost arts, reclaiming the literary holy land from the heathen. This is Dan Baltic.
And this is Matt Pegas.
And this is our top 10 episode, as all podcasts have as they're approaching the new year and, getting lazy and running out of content. That's,
right.
But we crucially have produced a lot of really good content this past 6 months or so. And this gives us a chance to revisit our top 10 things that we have read this year.
Right. It's our, originally when we talked about doing this, there was a notion of are we going to do a top 10 books of 2021 thing? I will be totally above board here. I probably have not read, I unlike most of the population, I have read 10 plus books this year, but I've absolutely not read 10 books that were published in 2021.
100% not. Yeah. We've
we're
read
all,
10
yeah.
books, but those books have been published in many different years.
Right.
And it's good that we've even read 10 books. As
It
you say,
is.
most people don't.
It is good, and we're not a fully funded operation here. We don't have a stack of what's the word, review copies on our desk. If that were the case, then maybe we could whip out such a list. Maybe in years future we'll have such a list. But for now, this is our top 10 / year in review. The first, I would say the first year of New Right, but it's actually the first. It's not even. We haven't even hit the 6-month mark yet.
That's crazy. It feels
is
like
crazy,
we've
actually,
done
yeah.
a year of work, frankly.
It does. We've definitely put a lot of work into this podcast this year.
But yeah,
but within those
first
6 months,
episode, August. Yeah. We've only been doing this for 4.5 months at this point.
For 4.5 months. I think this is this even episode 10? I don't know. I mean, I'm proud of
yeah,
the work
this
we've
is
done.
10.
We'll talk about
this
it.
is episode 10.
All right, it's perhaps a good number to end on. Although actually, not the audience doesn't need to hear this, and maybe I'll edit out. But we may end up posting this as episode 11.
Oh, correct. Yeah, no, that's true.
Anyway.
This is the stocking stuffer episode.
If all goes according to plan, this will be dropped, I don't know, December 27th, December 28th, something in that department.
For all the good little boys and girls of New Right.
Yes. You gotta whip out the metaphors this season. I don't know, do you want to start getting into the list, or do you want to, maybe we could talk just a tiny little rehash of, I guess this will go along with the list, but basically how this podcast came to be and
yeah, good, yeah.
I will go along with the list in many ways, and we can kind of do it seamlessly, but basically the story is, Dan and I met on Justin Murphy's forum, and see, even that wasn't exactly the beginning of the year. It was March of this year.
True,
and developed a virtual friendship over a shared interest in fiction and writing and publishing, and the sense that the type of work we were doing, it was not going to find a home in anything remotely mainstream or anything lucrative in the traditional publishing industry. And New Right was basically the product of a long email exchange, and I will credit Dan with the idea. He asked me one day if we should start a podcast, and my first reaction was that everyone starts podcasts. Does the world need another one? Which I think may or may not be a theme of one of the items on our list for 2021 that we'll get to. But I'm glad we started it. It's been a really incredible creative outlet for me. And as with anything else creative, you don't really worry so much about are there too many podcasts out there, or even if there's all that many people listening. What you worry about is, do you get something out of doing it? And I can very much say that I've gotten a ton out of doing every episode we've done. I've learned a lot, as we kind of talked about in the Kevin Kautzman episode. The whole social dimension of art and of writing, this podcast has really become that for me, and I hope to grow in the new year. I hope that we, one of my favorite podcasts, The Perfume Nationalist, one of the most successful podcasts from our sphere, is very much a network of people. And, I think at this point, New Right has a small, compact group of people that are following it, that are, posting and tweeting. So many of whom are former guests, but nevertheless, that's how it starts. And I hope we can grow that network and kind of lean more into that social element.
100%. And yeah, this, even if no one were listening, this isn't just, like a great outlet just talking about this shit, because you're a little more plugged into this corner of the internet, or were a little more plugged in than I was when we met. And frankly, I was losing my mind not being able to have these conversations, with anyone, because, in the normie sphere of, the world, reality, you can't talk about this stuff. And, so it's just it's a great outlet to, talk about this with you, and to, talk and crucially share it with our dear listeners.
Right. And again, I reiterate, as with great writing, as with a lot of the writing that we explore here on this podcast, it's all about, finding stuff that's honest and truthful, not necessarily pleasant all the time, but, talking about these important realities. And yeah, the goal is always, if you feel this need to express it, then that is in and of itself, in writing as in podcasting, I would say.
Absolutely. You mentioned that the initial idea for the pod was broached by me, but I would remiss if I did not say we would not have a pod without Matt here, who knows how to edit audio, among other excellent traits that Matt has, such as diligence and making sure this gets done and happens.
Thank you. I mean, I can't claim any real genius at audio editing, as unfortunately I'm sure many hecklers would love to point out.
It could be worse. It could be worse.
Look, I think I have a basic understanding of how to, splice audio tracks together, so that served us well. Also, I'll just go ahead and throw this out, and maybe this will be in motion if we post this later this month, as opposed to tomorrow, which is the plan, to post at the end of the month. New Right should be coming to Spotify and wherever the fuck else people get podcasts. I don't really use many of those platforms. Anyway, we're probably going to invest in some kind of RSS feed. So we should be expanding our reach soon.
To your favorite podcatcher, as the saying goes.
I don't know who says that, but I like it. To your favorite podcatcher or whatever.
One of these, I feel like with every pod, they're you'll find it on your favorite podcatcher.
That makes sense, given the way that I'm again learning the way that RSS feeds work. That kind of catches it, so to speak. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, hopefully we'll be expanding in every way in the new year.
We're getting big, as they say online. You got to get big in 2021, 2022 to survive the coming years. Get big, get strong, eat raw meat.
Yes.
And that brings us to our first entry on the list of the top 10 things we've read this year. And that would be Mr. Michael Ma and his two books, Harassment Architecture and Gothic Violence.
Yes, it's a little 2 in 1. We should add, these are in no particular order. This is neither number 1 or 10. We're just listing off sort of 10 items or 10, 10 talking points, some of which contain multiple books, in this case 2. Gothic Violence, which did come out in 2021. And Harassment Architecture, which came out in 2019. and this was selected as our first episode of New Right. What was the criteria? I don't remember, but it was a good choice, I would say, because Mike Ma is definitely one of the more exciting voices on, for lack of a better term, the dissident literary sphere. And I mean, yeah, reading, honestly, I don't even know if this is a good thing or something I should admit, but reading those books, changed my outlook, if not my life. I am not a subscriber to as we talked about on the show, I don't exactly know what Mike Ma stands for in every instance. I'm not co-signing on all of it, but kind of like when I read Bronze Age Mindset way back when and other of these sort of red pill books, definitely Mike Ma's sort of aesthetic vision and his, again, for lack of a better term, sort of philosophical vision really has been a major influence on me these past 6 months.
Yeah. So just to do like a recap of what the books are, like you, in case you haven't listened to our pod or, are not familiar. So they are kind of a semi-first person novelizations of a sort of, I guess, like trad eco-terrorist philosopher. Maybe that's I think that is a catch-all type of phrase, but I think that grabs a lot of what Ma is about. And just here, how you cross Patrick Bateman with Timothy McVeigh, with I don't know, your local bodybuilder,
right?
And
with Bap, I guess.
Yeah, with Bap. There we go. And it's funny. It has some really good satire. It's and also very there's a reason why he's so popular, and part of the reason is he's got a good style. It's very stylized.
Right.
It's very in the back of Harassment Architecture, he has those campaign poster art, which is just like very like gonzo out there.
Totally. I mean, when I think Mike Ma, I think it's a great example of how in literature and in, I don't know, internet use, style matters a lot. Because I say that these books influence me on a philosophical level. It's hard for me to even parse what I mean by that. I think what I mean more is that just stylistically, they're a huge source of inspiration and, frankly, joy. I don't know if that is the most common reaction because they're somewhat dark books in certain regards, but reading these books is really exciting, and the whole style and charisma that kind of goes along with Mike Ma is something to aspire to. Case in point, I guess I mentioned on the podcast that he has this massive Spotify playlist, which for someone controversial like Mike Ma, it's kind of arrestingly like these are just like good kind of pop and like emo rock songs, and I still listen to that playlist like almost every day. I don't know.
Oh wow.
It's a weird. It's just a strange thing, and it may seem extraneous to mention that, but I don't know. Style matters, music matters. The way that can go along with literature and sort of create a state of mind. In many ways, since we read these books in July, August, I think when I look back on 2021 and years of the future, I'll be like, oh yeah, that was when I was like really into Mike Ma. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that it was the white boy summer, and
right.
Who is a bigger white boy than Mike Ma?
For sure. So yeah, I guess that's the feather we can put in this cap is Gothic Violence was the book of the white boy summer.
Now moving to another white boy.
Wait,
Hearties.
I think all of our people might be white boys. Is this a problem?
Oh fuck, we're gonna get canceled. Damn, Matt, it's been a
Yeah.
good run. I think we're done.
We got a couple Jews on the list, so we're good.
That's true. We do. Well, one and yeah, and a half.
Maybe 1.5. I don't count it, but we can get into that later. Anyway,
So our next one is Heartiste, and Heartiste, the Godfather of game, the Godfather of game. It's a great title right there. He the reason why we picked him is we wanted to do an episode, the Manosphere to Literature Pipeline, and no one really, in my opinion, our opinion, I think, in the early days of writing about game, did it with the style and the flair of Heartiste, who was called Royce, and he is supposedly, apocryphally, in the context of his writings, lived in the Chateau Heartiste. And
right.
he then took on the name Heartiste, so people just call him Heartiste, and that's what we're going to call him. And he writes about picking up women in a way that is masterful, and it transcends the mechanics of it and gets into the philosophical underpinnings and gets into a lot of, what makes men men, women women, and you see glimmers in it of the problems of today. It's crucial this was written in 2010, but he's very clearly identified hypergamy as a big issue, and his book is how to take advantage of hypergamy to use it so you can be a successful Lothario. And I think we can see how in the 10 years since then, not just hypergamy but other aspects of society that dovetail with that have kind of exacerbated, and were kind of in some respects in a not excellent position. So that is kind of, he diagnoses the problem 10 years ago, and indeed, as we've mentioned on that pod, he comes to eventually to some solutions of his own, which was not in the writing that we read, nor do we support.
Right. The disavowal with Heartiste, of course, kind of going off the rails. But as you mentioned, he diagnoses, or I don't want to say diagnose, because that's to imply a cure or whatever, which again was not so much the focus of what we read. What we read was how best to take advantage of the sexual marketplace as it was in 2010 or so. And when I think of Heartiste, he's one of these writers. It's tempting to use the red pill metaphor because it's illustrative here, but I don't even just mean sort of right-wing types, although certainly this is endemic to writers in our sphere. I'd put him up there with, well, obviously Bap, but also Camille Paglia, with Nietzsche. I'd even, make that stretch back to, back in history. He's one of these writers that it doesn't so much matter what they're writing about. Nietzsche was a philosopher writing about philosophy and Greek culture. Camille Paglia wrote about Western art from the Renaissance to today, and Bap is a right-wing bodybuilder, and Heartiste wrote about picking up women, and all of these topics are different, but it's just this incredibly red pilling, for lack of a better term, process where you read these people's writings, and just there's a truth, sometimes a brutal truth, imbued in every word, and it's evident that you are dealing with a visionary, someone who sees things as they are, unadorned, and maybe their conclusions are not always correct or what we'd like to think, but that basic visionary quality is evident on every page, and these are some of my favorite writers to read.
Agreed. Agreed. Moving on to another two visionaries. We're pairing these essays together because that's how we did it when we did the pod on them, and they both wrote essays that were visionary and predicted the future in some respects. One essay, the Flight 93 election by Michael Anton, and the other, Vivictus by Curtis Yarvin, Mencius Moldbug. And Flight 93 election, just on the level of literature, I think we both agree Anton is an excellent writer, and he has a real command over, like, the Flight 93 election. What a metaphor. And that is like, when he wrote this, he wrote it from an anonymous internet account. And okay, I think it was published by the Claremont Review of Books. But okay, back then, and it was right before the 2016 election, no one had even really heard of the Claremont Review of Books.
Yeah.
This made its way into the culture because he called it the Flight 93 election, and that was a stroke of genius.
Right. And it was, I always love this factoid, and this can be our little in memoriam end of the year thing too. I mean, I love this factoid that the Flight 93 election was read aloud on the Rush Limbaugh show. So to a massive normie BoomerCon audience, and as far as political essays go, it's excellent. And I enjoy a lot of kind of further down the rabbit hole type of political speculation that goes on our corner of the internet. But at the end of the day, and this is really something that I've come even, to realize even more perhaps over this past year, perhaps for the past couple of years, is that at the end of the day, it's not all about these sort of big-brained political autistic ideologies. You have to reach out and build coalition with, that basic American demographic. Call them BoomerCons, if you will. Many of them are, but we might also call them the Amerikaner. The Trump coalition, in short. And, Michael Anton, and even to an extent, Yarvin, I'll give him credit, are very good. Yarvin's a little more complicated, I guess, but nevertheless, seem to be very much aware of that is the political audience, that is that demographic is the source of political power.
Exactly. And boy, did Anton help move the needle and help wield that power, because this was a touchstone. And like lines like comparing the election of Trump to playing Russian roulette, to the a potential election of a President Hillary Clinton to playing Russian roulette with a semi-auto. That was just such a brilliant metaphor. It just, sticks in your mind immediately. And, it's hilarious because, of course, that's not even possible to, play roulette with a semi-auto. You just blow your brains out. And, it hammered it home, so to say. And Yarvin obviously has a somewhat different style, a little more, as I think you've said, Matt, big-brained, a little more very online. But even so, still, speaks plainly, truthfully. And, frankly, in the wake of the 2020 election, there were not that many, pieces about the legitimacy of that election. And for very good reason, the media won't touch it. And, there just isn't that much alternative voices out there.
Right.
And so Yarvin is one of them. And I think he wrote, a very prescient portrait of what happened. And, essentially, and it's the same thing I said to you on the pod, and I think I said to you before the pod, you'll never really know. And politics is dirty. And, frankly, it's always going to be very close from now on because the country is so evenly divided, and the one who cheats better is going to win. And the best cheater is, in some respects, the legitimate president, because if you're the better cheater, you're more powerful.
Right. No, I mean, Yarvin is another one of these writers who, you will get smarter from reading, because he has a certain view of things which, is unadorned, and unsentimental, and, takes a look at things and is willing to face those hard truths, like that there's always, fuckery going on under the surface, so to speak. Vivictus was a great read, and the reason we did that show this year, and the reason why, even though I suppose technically neither of those essays came out in 2021, Vivictus must have been released about a year ago, perhaps today. We're recording this on the 15th. It's in that general vicinity. These two essays, when read together, they form these bookends to the Trump presidency. And the moment right after the Trump presidency, when you can look back and, the Owl of Minerva moment, so to speak, with the Trump presidency, that's a very 2021 thing, because, of course, we had January 6th of this year, and then, Trump's ouster, and then Biden coming into power, and that just kind of being this steady downward slope in so many ways. That really defines 2021. We're still, I don't know, I can't speak for 2022, but as far as 2021 is concerned, we were still in that moment just after Trump. And so a fine time to read those two bookends as we did.
Absolutely. And, you should read it over holiday. They're still very important. They still will help you, understand things. And I think the next person on our list wrote a book about helping people understand something very complicated.
Yes, very complicated indeed. This one's a me item. I don't think Dan has read the book yet.
Yeah, not yet.
The goal is to get Michael Millerman, the writer of this next book, perhaps on the podcast. So maybe leading up to it. But also, this one's not a book for everyone. It's philosophy. And rather dense philosophy of that. Next item is Beginning with Heidegger by Michael Millerman. Michael is a Canadian-based former, a PhD in political science, who Beginning with Heidegger is basically the published form of his dissertation, published by Arctos, late 2020. I read it at the very beginning of this year. I think I literally read it on my plane trip back from the holiday in 2020, for Christmas in 2020.
Oh, wow.
So, very much a top of the year item for me. I've taken a couple of courses with Michael Millerman. The last one was at the beginning of this year with through Justin Murphy's company, Other Life Co., which is also ties into meeting Dan and starting this podcast, because that's the reason I was on Justin Murphy's forum in the first place, was as a place to talk about this course that I was taking, actually not on Heidegger but on Leo Strauss. Anyway, to summarize the book, Beginning with Heidegger, again, Michael Millerman's dissertation, published form from Arctos, deals with the influence of Martin Heidegger, who is a philosopher that I, like many people in our sphere, have been interested in for some time. Really complicated, and in many ways, you might say dense philosopher, though I think deceptively so. I think once you really delve into his thought, maybe it's not as complicated and strange as it seems, and no one better to introduce you to it perhaps than Michael Millerman in this book. And he summarizes Heidegger's views in general, but more so talks about their influence on Richard Rorty, Leo Strauss, Jacques Derrida, these basically philosophers from across the spectrum since the time of Heidegger, since the early 20th century, how these various philosophers, one of them, Rorty being an American liberal philosopher, Jacques Derrida being, a post-structuralist leftist, Leo Strauss being the godfather of neoconservatism, so to speak, all took either influence from Heidegger or had to pass through the thought of Heidegger. And it's a very compellingly laid out essay. And again, not necessarily for everyone, but if you are interested in understanding Martin Heidegger's philosophy more, and it's something that I would advocate as someone interested in philosophy, then Beginning with Heidegger by Michael Millerman is a very good book for you. I left one name off of the list of philosophers that Beginning with Heidegger covers, which is Alexander Dugin, the Russian, I'll just call him a Russian philosopher because I don't necessarily believe that he's a fascist as he's accused of being. And I didn't leave that off on purpose, but it's fitting to end talking a little bit about Dugin because Dugin is also is another philosopher of a lot of interest to me, and another philosopher of a lot of interest to Michael, and someone he's translated. He's pretty much the primary translator of Alexander Dugin into English, I guess, as well as Richard Spencer's ex-wife, Nina Capernova. I think, I'm not sure if there's been any other translations except by Michael Millerman and Richard Spencer's ex-wife of Dugin into English on any kind of extensive basis. I could go on. I hope we get Michael Millerman on this show and that we can go more into this. But basically, the reason why Millerman, who is a very, very nice guy, he has a family. He's not what you'd think of as a dissident per se, and he's certainly not an extremist. But he was effectively canceled from academia for his interest in Alexander Dugin, and had to publish his book with Arctos, which I like Arctos quite a bit. I'm not trying to slander their name in any way, but obviously Arctos is fairly right-wing publishing outfit, but that is the only place I would take Michael's work. What were you going to say? Yeah, sorry.
Like many, or maybe not like many, but I did read Heidegger in college. Don't remember virtually any of it, so I am a prime customer of Michael's here. And I'm looking forward to digging into Beginning with Heidegger so I can, remember what I once knew.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the boat that I was in. I was long into Heidegger, and I kind of, a few years after college, have just been like, oh, Heidegger, like, I don't really remember what any of that was about. And then one day, it kind of hit me like, it would actually be good to know what that was about. And between that and kind of reading some of largely Michael Millerman is kind of the person I've been reading about, on Heidegger. And as well as I actually took a course with Michael on some of Heidegger's work that in 2020 into the beginning of this year brought me to a point where, I feel like I have some idea of what Heidegger was saying. However, this is all about 9 months in the past, so I've probably forgotten it all again, and will need to be reminded. But we can move to the next item, which I guess I can just get right into if it sounds good, because this is another one that I put on the list, and another one that I read around this same period of time when I was taking a class with Michael Millerman through Justin Murphy's company, which is Justin Murphy's Based Deleuze. Have you read any of his book, Dan?
I have not, but it is also on my list, like Michael's, and I've heard that it's pretty good.
It is pretty good. Based Deleuze is a relatively quick read, quicker than Beginning with Heidegger, I would say. And it's a really creative take on the manner in which the thought of a philosopher as ostensibly leftist as Gilles Deleuze actually has quite a bit of resonance with, for lack of a better term, the based and the base sphere and our corner of Twitter. And in Deleuzean form, it is not a sort of analytical philosophy, premises, conclusion, argument. It is a rhizomic, like a mushroom, like a colony of mushrooms type of book, which deals with different topics one by one, and there's a lot of just gems of wisdom. The one within Deleuze's work, evidently, but also within Justin's book. The one that I remember perhaps most particularly and that affected me the most on an existential level being, this is going to sound obnoxiously academic, but Justin Murphy's reading of Deleuze's reading of Nietzsche's concept of the eternal recurrence of the same, and the notion of not simply rolling the dice and always loving fate, not simply loving fate in the sense of being a hedonist, but rather grounding one's commitments, grounding the circumstances of one's life, and affirming all of it. Not sure it's something that I could unpack in the span of this episode, but it had a pretty big influence on me. And Justin Murphy, who is, Justin Murphy has, and related to that concept I just talked about, Justin Murphy is known for having a arranged marriage service that he will provide to those interested, as long as they're serious. And I have not utilized that and won't, but Dan and I were inadvertently introduced by Justin Murphy, perhaps in a similar fashion. And this podcast
bound for life.
The product of our union, the union of minds. Which Justin Murphy's probably busy, but he should know he's responsible for New Right on a profound level.
It, I'm sure, will bring him great joy, and we would love to have you on the pod, Justin, sometime. So, let's do it. Moving on, I think, to the next one. Now, this is a play. This is not a book, but nevertheless, plays are often read as novels, or they are read as well as performed and observed. So, Moderation by Kevin Kautzman is our next entry here. And this holds a special place in my heart because I am a fan of theater, and theater, as anyone who is even passingly familiar with that industry can tell you, is probably the wokest, least creative space among the various artistic mediums today. Anything that is the slightest bit honest will be crushed under the pan grievance, pan identity boot of the American the GAE, as they say. But Kevin's play is not that. Kevin wrote a play that is daring, that is critical of this moment in time in a very interesting way. It's about a content moderator at a Facebook-like company that he has an assistant, and he forms an unlikely kind of fixation on his assistant, while they both run the gauntlet of moderating content, which is essentially kind of subjecting yourself to disturbing images all day long in a Clockwork Orange-like fashion. And this serves as, a great vehicle for exploring the inhumanity of technology, the inhumanity of male-female relations today, and it's really a great exercise in something that we have not we have described, but we have talked about how Strauss has described it as writing between the lines.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think I already said quite a lot of effusive things about Is effusive a positive word? I'm losing my words.
It is.
Okay, so I thought
It's-
about moderation on the show we did with Kautzman. But what I'll say now is just that it, after years of not really thinking about theater, it is a play that reminded me of what theater can do. It is, a quite profound, and very simple two-person show that manages to do in the way, as you said, that it explores technology and the relationship between the sexes and so much else. What millions and millions of dollar budget movie would be able to do, but in a very simple and direct way. And in terms of the writing between the lines of it all, there too, it is a play that it doesn't wear any kind of ideology on its sleeve. Rather, it is interested in finding the truths of our time, within the details. And in the case of this play, a lot of it revolves around, sifting through, hours and hours of heinous content online. We're kind of all content moderators, and even though we don't all have this job that the characters in Kevin's play have, it is quite crushingly relatable. And another way I'd pitch it is that it's like Joker, if without all like the gay bullshit that is kind of gets caught up with Joker. It's like that movie Joker in terms of the way it hones in on that kind of personality. But rather than some fictional, war between the rich and the poor comic book setup, moderation goes deep and cuts to the truth.
Agreed. It's similar to Waiting for Godot in the respect that it's two characters who are kind of both waiting for some form of deliverance, and it's really an emblematic play for our time, in that we are all kind of like atomized, mired in this this social moment, and waiting for either that promotion to get into the elite, and you think that's a concept in the play. Waiting for love, there, that's one of the concepts there. He's trying to form a connection with his employee, and waiting for God, and at the end of the play, we kind of get a glimpse into what that wait might entail.
Right.
And I won't say any more, but Kevin, I don't think anyone watching this, regardless of what side of the political aisle you're on, and chances are, if you're listening to us, you are culturally on the right side of the aisle. Which is to say the correct side of the aisle. Mm-hmm. But no matter which side you are on, I think you could watch Moderation, and you could find something in there that you agree with. And frankly, you'll probably think that the author agrees with you too. And that's, in my opinion, the sign of a good writer. In that
completely.
I read challenging work that can be interpreted in different ways.
Exactly. Moderation, there was a Zoom sort of performance of it at the beginning of this month, at the beginning of December. It is available in staged reading form, I believe, to the general public. So we will post a link with this episode. Very much worth a watch. There's a lot of good movies out there, obviously, but this play is worth, spending that evening watching. Let it be your evening's entertainment. You won't be disappointed, and Dan and I will wait in anticipation of the spiritual sequel to Moderation, which perhaps it will be Kevin's Killdozer musical.
Oh yes, that would be something. That would be so
Yeah,
bad.
yeah. I mean, and I'm not even just kidding here. Like, the Killdozer musical, I think, would be the spiritual sequel to this play, and I will leave that as a breadcrumb to, for people to figure out what may or may not happen in moderation.
So a world where Killdozer is possible is a world that is, not the best of all possible worlds. It might be something close to hell. And that brings us to our next book, which is Welcome to Hell by
Right.
Bad Billy Pratt.
Our recent interviewee, Bad Billy Pratt, Welcome to Hell, I think, released by that. Here is another book that was actually released in 2021, to its credit, by Terror House Press in June of this year.
Welcome to Hell is, in some respects, a collection of both personal essays and cultural commentary from Billy Pratt. And really, we describe him in that episode as Frog Twitter's Chuck Klosterman, and I think that's apt. He's has a very incisive mind. He looks at, a lot of, cultural phenomena, and has the types of insights that, frankly, you would get canceled for in the mainstream. You can't write these types of, cultural commentary essays. So he's our guy there.
Yeah,
And-
definitely. I mean, he's Frog Twitter, Chuck Klosterman meets Delicious Tacos. Of course, the comparison is inescapable. Given sort of the way he writes about personal relationships and sex, and the general atomization and hellish nature of our world. But yeah, no, Billy Pratt was, I'll say, a really great discovery for me this year. His book was published the same month as my book by the same publisher, Terror House, and I always say this, when I bought that book, it made me very proud to be a Terror House alumnus as well, because it's a great fucking book. And Billy Pratt, he's a great poster as well. He's great on Twitter. Catch him pretty much reposting any and all horrific or clown world type news items with the simple caption "Welcome to Hell," often followed by a link to where you can buy his book, which is just about the greatest marketing scheme, but meaningful marketing scheme for a book that I've seen.
And we would be remiss if we did not say that he has an excellent cover, which is a rendering of Casey Anthony, who is, a lead starlet in Hell. And this was drawn by none other than Matt Lawrence, who we did an episode, our first guest, and who has designed the New Right logo, as well as the Matt's book cover of Dragon Day, and all the Terror House book covers, and the book covers of Delicious Tacos.
Yes, the illustrator of this whole scene in so many important ways. And definitely another shout out to Matt for being our first guest. We both enjoyed his book as well. I think we wanted to also just kind of highlight Terror House as a great publisher. Some other books I read from Terror House beyond, well, obviously I read my own book, but also Welcome to Hell, as we mentioned, and Matt Lawrence's book Bronin. Another great few books I read this year were Andy Nowicki, the original quote-unquote alt-right novelist, republished a lot of his books with Terror House, so those are definitely also up there for me in terms of what I read in 2021.
Yeah.
You should definitely, if you haven't already, check out Terror House Press. Some great titles, including my own, which I think we'll talk about in a bit.
Absolutely. Terror House. And we had Matt Forney on the pod. Check out that episode. He is the publisher of Terror House Press. And, friend of the pod. Next up, is a novel that very well could have been published by Terror House Press, but it was published independently by Paul Town, John, which is a satire. And this, it's interesting. Matt, you crashed at my place a couple of weeks ago over Thanksgiving, and I had this book lying around. I had not read it yet. I just read that it was a kind of like frog Twitter satire. I thought, well, that's up my alley. And so you had been reading it, and you showed me a paragraph, and you said just read this, you'll like it. And the paragraph was going like, John, who is the protagonist, thought about writing a book, but he realized books were gay. And he thought about painting a picture, and he realized that, that was stupid. And then he realized that the best thing that he could do would be to do the most brilliant thing of all, which is to start a podcast. And
Yes.
That was, very much up our alley.
What you say is true. I was crashing at your house a few weeks ago, and it's not the longest novel ever, so I was like, I'll read as much of this as I can before I leave. I didn't get actually that far because we were kind of busy, but I got to that key paragraph where it's like I don't know if you call it the inciting incident, but the moment where the protagonist, John, that moment where his life is irrevocably altered, and it's when he decides to start a podcast, which of course it's a little bit satirical. It's a little bit of that wink, wink, nudge, nudge thing I mentioned earlier in the show, where there's a certain resistance sometimes to start podcasts because it feels like it's something that every John Doe is doing. But nevertheless, I'm not discouraged by that satire. Obviously, it's hilarious. I haven't finished the book. I got to that paragraph, I showed it to you, and I don't know how it ends. I know you did read the rest of it, Dan. I don't know how much more you want to get into about it, but basically from what I've read, it seems like a hilarious book.
It is a hilarious book. He really, Town has down the the kind of dramatic irony of writing something that as the author sounds stupid or dialogue or whatever, and that the reader will identify as stupid, but that the characters are taking at face value.
Right.
And it's something that is a literary technique, and I've used it a lot in Nutcracker, my own novel, and it's something that, in my opinion, when you come across lines like that, they're the ones that I laugh out loud at the most.
For sure. No, that was another reason I told you like the paragraph, and we'll get more into this in a moment, is because it reminded me of your book, of Nutcracker, because of that kind of dramatic irony. Last thing I'll say about what I've read of John by Paul Town is that, I think I even said this to you, because I probably read that first bit that I probably read in 2 sittings, and the first time I'm like, I don't quite get the tone of this yet. Like, it felt. I wasn't sure how sincere it was. Obviously the character's name was John Doe, so I knew there was something satirical going on. But like, in a lot of ways, Paul Town is just describing a pretty relatable everyman, and I almost found it like more. It felt almost more sincere than I was expecting. But then I got to that point, and it was kind of interesting from a literary mechanics point of view. I got to that paragraph where it says he would start a podcast, and it's like this kind of vaguely ironic thing. And immediately I got, to what this novel had been leading up to, and I'm excited to read the rest of it.
It quite literally takes off from there, because I don't think it will spoil it for the readers that his podcast is quite successful. And so successful it is unbelievably so. And so as a reader, someone who maybe is in this corner of the internet thinking about podcasts, him or herself, well, the idea that you would record a podcast and then get paid $10,000 by Chuck Palahniuk to fly out to LA after your first episode to do a podcast with him, that's pretty fantastical. But that is
Oh
just
man, is that what
one.
happens?
That is
Christ.
just one of the things that happens to our man John Doe.
It sounds like a wonderful fantasy novel to inspire my own fantasies.
Yeah, I know. I mean, like, if it weren't for the fact it's a complete satire, I'd feel a little shitty reading it myself. But that brings us to a novel that, in some respects, is satire, and it's a good thing it is because there are some things that you certainly wouldn't want to happen to you, and that is a novel by you, Matt, Dragon Day.
Yep, to put my own book on the list, or maybe it was you who put it on the list, Dan. But we're gonna talk about it briefly in any case.
Dragon
yeah.
Day
Go on. Better
is
coming from you.
Dragon Day is, and I think this distinguishes it from a lot of other literary works in our sphere. Matt, he sat down and wrote a proper novel. This has real characters. This has character development. None of them are Matt, as far as I can tell. I certainly hope that they're not Matt. So Matt wrote a novel about a kind of incel loner type who goes to a school that is kind of Ivy League or very fancy
Very much
liberal
like
arts
that milieu, yeah.
type college, set in 2016 in the ferment and fervor of the Trump election, or the first Trump election.
Mm-hmm.
And
actually, I'm gonna be pretentious and cut you off right before, because I purposely didn't want to write about Trump and about that being in the background, so I purposely said it in 2015, right before.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. No, I didn't mean that as an actually factually kind of thing. I meant it more just to,
No,
bring the
yeah.
conversation. But it is right before that moment. But nevertheless, I can see why you'd say 2016, because it was meant to capitalize on that moment sort of right before.
The social change that was afoot. And so this main character, Toby, he finds himself to be a bit of an outcast, and doesn't really fit into the frat and whatever culture, but he makes a friend in the gym who is he runs into someone named Professor Wallingford, who is modeled on probably a number of kind of notorious characters from our side of the internet. I don't know how much more you want me to suggest or imply.
Oh, yeah, no. Just basically that Professor Wallingford, the sort of villain or antagonist of the novel, is an ostensibly young and handsome, ostensibly leftist professor who is kind of an esoteric fascist of sorts, who has a sort of secret teaching that he teaches to an inner ring of disciples in which he inducts our protagonist. The best, my favorite, or actually a lot of people have said a lot of nice things, but one of my favorite, one of the very early things someone said about it, was my, I don't know him super well, so I can't just be like my friend, but one of my online buddies, who is a long-term proponent of dissident literature and the alternative literature scene, Ben Arzate, when I sent him my manuscript, said it reminded him of The Secret History by Donna Tartt, as if it was written by Michelle Houellebecq. I like to think of it that way myself. I did, years ago now, because I was working on the novel for a matter of years. But I did read The Secret History, which is a great novel from that 80s, 90s period. About it's actually a meme now, by the way. I was learning about the other week, this thing called like dark academia or something. It's like a TikTok trend, but anyway, it's like this whole aesthetic of like people who are super academic or whatever, and The Secret History kind of encapsulates that milieu, and I think to an extent my novel does, and in a slightly different 2015 set way. That sort of Gothic library steps type of imagery, and the notion of a just a professor with a massive ego and an inner ring of disciples. But that's the setting, secret history-esque. Some of the plot, a little secret history-esque. It gets a little violent, as the secret history does. But I like so many other writers on this list of our top 10, I'm also really influenced by Michel Houellebecq, and I'm interested in the theme of atomization and the decline of the West, and that those themes are very prevalent in Dragon Day as well.
What I will say, to put maybe a button on it, is I think your novel, Matt, is a really kind of perfect blend of thriller and satire. And it's like it had me turning the pages. I wanted to know, is our protagonist Toby going to escape the clutches of Wallingford? But as I'm reading, there are aspects that just made me laugh out loud, like the first few pages where Toby is bemoaning his lack of manhood in a very anatomically obvious way. There's just it's an excellent combination of a plot-driven page-turner and some really good comedic writing. So,
well, thank you. Yeah. So you mentioned those first few. So you mentioned those first few pages in the book where Toby is bemoaning the size of his penis, which was sort of the original kernel that I started writing about, years ago. My whole, I guess, process as a writer and in projects I'm working on now even is my goal is always, and I would like to think, people like Houellebecq are similar in their ways, to find these just really extreme and weird emotions that one may come across in their lives, things that are sources of shame or embarrassment, and for better or worse, my goal is to always lean as far as possible into those, perhaps exaggerate them, and just different notions of male shame and male feelings of inadequacy were sort of the initial spark for Dragon Day that I turned into a thriller plot. So I think that probably kind of is why thank you for saying so, that it's a balance between satire and thriller, is because, inevitably, I never set out, I don't really consider myself a comedic writer, but I've been told that some of my writing is funny, and I think it's because I'm just, again, as we do on this podcast, the writing we talk about, always just looking to hone in on that truth, because often the truth is the funniest thing.
That's right.
And, you do have to exaggerate it a bit, and I think that's kind of where the thriller plot line comes in. But on that note, I will also, Dan, add your book to this little top 10 list, which is...
Thank you, Matt.
Maybe it's kind of silly because the book is not out. It's, God willing, it's going to be out next year. But I read it. It's a great thing that I read in 2021. It's Nutcranker by Dan Baltic. Another novel like mine with real characters, a real novel, so to speak, and a real satire. Dan, you said that the Confederacy of Dunces was a major inspiration, and that...
So I would call it a modern-day Confederacy of Dunces. Like, where would Ignatius J. Riley, who's the main character of Confederacy of Dunces, who would he be today? He would be an incel edgelord, living in Brooklyn, walking around doing, crazy shit. And that is, in some respects, a very reductive description of Nutcranker. But,
it whets the appetite. And, you've said this on past episodes, and we've actually had people, reach out to us over Twitter and say, oh, that sounds great. Which bodes well for how well the book will do. You publishers out there, it bodes well for how well the book will do when it is released.
Listen in, guys.
Appetite for this kind of thing. And, Nutcranker is excellent. As we mentioned earlier, it's kind of that similar tone to John by Paul Town, where it's a certain dramatic irony where the narrator says stuff that he doesn't realize, the delusions and the stupidity inherent to it, but the reader obviously does realize. I think similar to Dragon Day, it is a little bit of an exploration of that male sense of inadequacy, which as well
Definitely.
as just to, generally living in an atomized society. And in that regard, it's very much in my wheelhouse, and I think probably very much in the wheelhouse of everyone listening.
Definitely.
And explores that stuff effectively. It's got a twist ending, I will also say. So look out for
Yeah.
that.
So just as a not recapitulation of the plot, it follows around a man who is in his late 20s. He gets fired from his NGO job because they discover he has a Mencius mold bug style blog, and that doesn't really fly with them. So he gets fired in spectacular fashion. He bounces around, but he manages to preserve his sanity by seizing upon a new project, and that project is to transform the girl that he starts dating, who he meets through a BDSM website, into a literal slave trad girl for him. And he sets about this, and he's facing significant headwinds because he thinks that he's going to prevail, but he perhaps is being subverted by her and her leftist friends, and he runs into some trouble there. And when that inevitably unravels, he goes a bit off the rails, Matt.
Yeah, so it has that same sort of Paul. I call it the Paul Schrader narrative. Where it's about tight focus on a sort of male psychology, sexually repressed in certain regards, perhaps, or sexually underserved in certain regards, and ends in a sort of explosive orgasm of violence, or is it you have to read it to
You'll
see
have to see.
how explosive it is.
And just for everyone's edification, Nutcracker sounds like a crazy title, but it is in fact the name of his favorite pornography aggregation platform, Nutcracker. You
Yes.
log on to watch porn and get your nuts cranked.
Exactly. No, and that brings up another good point also, to the point where in many ways I do think the novel is about one major theme at least is BDSM, and the notion of using that to I guess right wing ends, which is hilarious. If
Based
that kind
BDSM.
of exactly
Based Assad.
Oh, precisely. And I mean that's also a theme in Dragon Day is a look. It's also a major theme in the last second edition I'm about to pitch. But the sort of ironic connections between certain paraphilias and certain fetishes and certain just really, frankly, degenerate stuff with the general, even though it's degenerate, it kind of takes a sort of red pilling, we might even say, look at power dynamics in the same way that a lot of the political stuff we explore does. So if that kind of thing, if you like my book, I think you'll like Nutcracker. If you can see the humor in that sort of notion, then Nutcracker and my book both, I think, are very much for you.
And I will make the bold prediction or proclamation now that Nutcracker will be published in 2022.
You know what, Dan? I think it will, because either someone's going to rise to the occasion,
Or I'm just going to publish it if I have to.
because
It's not that hard. Paul Town did it. It looks pretty good. I can't imagine he's a millionaire, and I have some money, so we'll get this thing out there, and your nuts will be cranked.
Right, and I'll use that to transition to my. It's not even. I don't even consider this an honorable mention. It's just that I literally didn't know this book was. I wasn't sure if this book was going to come out until in 2021 until this past week when it did come out, which is my good friend Robert Stark's novel Vaporfornia, the sequel to his Frog Twitter 2017 classic, Journey to Vapor Island. Gosh, I just published on my Substack a review of the book, and I don't want to drag the show on forever, so I will direct your attention there. It's definitely one of the better. I think it's one of the better nonfiction things I've ever written. Robert's novel. I think it's one of the funniest novels of the year, not counting Nutcranker, because Nutcranker isn't technically out yet. It's very grand in scope. Robert Stark is a California native. You may catch him blogging about that on Substack. This is a somewhat cartoonish but very hilarious novel which explores the sort of sexual and economic undercurrents of the state of California. I could say more, but I will. I'll link to my Substack. Vaporfornia by Robert Stark just came out, self-published. Again, I'll link to it. It's very much a book that I had a large hand in helping edit and produce, so to speak. And it is very much a book worth having on the radar.
I'm excited to read it and excited to have Robert on the pod. He is an upcoming guest on New Rag.
He is. We will have him on top of next year.
And I think that brings us to the end of the list, Matt.
I think so. Here's to a excellent 2022.
Only good things, only more things, only right things. Over and out.
Signing out.